Are you ready, Mr. Gabriel?
I'm ready indeed, Dierdre.
Album Network presents Peter Gabriel, From Us to You. Hello, I'm Dierdre O'Donoghue, your host for this intimate conversation with one of music's most influential and compelling personalities, long a major force in shaping and expanding the boundaries in rock. On his new album, Peter continues to stretch and enchant, coming up with another lyrical, musical, and visual masterpiece. And he's ready to talk to us about us. Presentation of this non-commercial Peter Gabriel radio special is made possible by a grant from AT&T.
Come talk to me. Come talk to me.
Peter, on the liner notes for your new Us album, you write, "Much of this record is about relationships. I'm dedicating it to all those who have taught me about loving and being loved." And then you go on and you thank your parents, you name your parents, and the two women who have been vital to you in your life, and your daughters. At what point did you realize that that was going to be the focal point of this album? Where did it begin for you?
I think probably about halfway through. I knew I was going to be writing a lot of personal songs, but I didn't know that was going to dominate in the way that it has done. In that I started off working on 23 different ideas, and of which about 12 were finished. And it seemed very much to be pointing in that way. You know, and this period has been, in terms of sort of lyrical source, about 5 years, even though it's probably from 2 years ago that I started really writing properly. But I think some of these experiences incorporated the breakup of my marriage, and then the relationship with Rosanna, which was very intense for me too, and that also broke up. So I then had to look back and, from my own side, try and understand what it was that I was getting wrong and doing wrong. And I was very fortunate, I think, in that when the marriage was breaking up, we were introduced to couples group therapy, and I did a couple of years with that, and then 3 years singles group therapy, which I stopped just before Christmas. And I think I learned an amazing amount from that. But during that time, I had to look at quite a lot of stuff that I didn't really like about myself.
I find it very brave for anyone to be so open. I suppose in Western culture, women amongst themselves would tend to be open with their feelings. Certainly much less so men, and of the cultures I've encountered, British men, British people in general, are very closed with their feelings. So it would seem that it took a lot of courage for you not only to approach the process, but to be so revealing, so open, so publicly. Did it feel courageous to you?
I think it took a certain amount of balls from my end, but I mean, I've got a whole lot more comfortable talking about myself, my feelings, as a result of this sort of work in a group. One of the things I like about a group situation is that you're not going and shifting responsibility onto someone else to heal your sickness or your problem. It's a group of people, all of whom have problems that they're working on, and it's quite balanced, and there's a mixture of men and women there. And I think all the men had to look at the feeling part of their nature. You know, it was good from both sides, I think. So for English people too, particularly, who are uncomfortable, as you so rightly put it, looking at their feelings, and certainly, you know, the idea of therapy is still seen as something to be suspicious of in England. So in the way that I gained an enormous amount out of it, I think it was important that I should be able to talk about it, because perhaps some of the sort of fear and dread that I felt before I went into it might be reduced for other people in a similar situation.
Well, on a lot of different levels. There are a lot of different ways. As the parent, as the father, as the big brother, as the friend, saying, yes, it's okay to do this.
Yeah, and also a willingness to look at the dark side, you know, the stuff that we don't like to show the world all the time. Because I think that's definitely something which I was required to do in that group situation. And in a sense, in the Digging in the Dirt video, which is in some ways an analogy, I mean, the song is in some ways an analogy for that process. The three words that grow out of the ground are dig, help, and heal. And in a sense, by going underground and looking at the demons and facing them, and then exposing them to daylight, you diminish the power that they have in influencing your life.
They're not controlling you anymore. As long as you've brought up Digging in the Dirt, it's a song that's just jam-packed with imagery and emotions and powers. As a musical creation, it works very forcefully. And then comes the video, and there's an entire truckload of new images and ideas thrown on top and layered on. How much of that are you involved in? How do you go about writing that? How do you go about scripting that and then putting those specific images together? It's unsettling almost. It's disturbing.
Well, I think the visual side of what I do is really important to me, whether it's from the sleeve to the touring, and especially the videos, because they now reach a lot of people, and people sort of, I think, interpret stuff through the filter of the video. So I spend quite a lot of time in discussions with whoever it is that's working on the piece. But I work with some really wonderful people, particularly directors, and in a sense, they still have a free hand in directing things, but it's at the ideas stage that I get more involved. Although there are a couple of tracks on this record, or one anyway, that I'm going to get involved in the directing side too, I think. But it's, I mean, it does sometimes take it further on down a path.
Did you set out to make the Digging in the Dirt video unsettling?
Yeah. Because it was, I mean, initially it actually originated in another project which wasn't part of me. Although in a sense, I think when an artist is doing anything, they're sort of putting bits of themselves into whatever they do, whether they think they are or not. But it had originated from this project that I'd started and didn't finish about death row and inmates of death row, and started getting into why people kill, and then it occurred to me that some of what was drawing me to that subject might have been my own murderous feelings that I hadn't looked at. And although, you know, I don't think I'm a high risk in terms of potential murderer, I do think that I had aggression and anger that I hadn't really dealt with properly.
Do you think we have that as part of our nature, instinctively? That's something we have to deal with?
Yeah, I think so, but quite often people, I mean, in a sense, I think it's good to look at whatever part of your personality isn't visible on the surface. So if the world perceives you as a very angry person, then maybe it's a softer part of your nature that you need to risk looking at. Similarly, you know, if you're seen as a sort of softer person, which I think was more my perception, then it's good to look at the aggression that's underneath as well. I mean, it's just good, I think, to dig down a little bit. And although, you know, I don't think the world needed another self-obsessed me sort of breakup type record, it was central to my life for the last 5 years. And that process, therefore, felt like it ought to be in the music.
There's a beautiful ambiguity and a duality in the title of the album, Us, and what you've described as the boxing of us versus them and the breaking down of those boxes. And then you've expanded that notion, and you've got the Box art project that's come along with it, and your studios are in Box.
Yeah.
Tying together of the symbols.
Yeah, well, I think the original sort of us consciousness was from some Ramdas stuff that I'd read some time ago. And I had the pleasure to work with him on a project in San Francisco, which was a sort of community action thing. But I think it went somewhere else with it. And, you know, I do describe the two us's of the relationship, as you say, and also this larger box, us, which has all humanity in it. And I think just by labeling, language is powerful, and labeling people as them in whatever format may be is dangerous, because it puts them outside, and it's much easier to get disassociated, disconnected with them, and that allows you to do nasty things to them or cut yourself off and think of them in different ways. So I think the larger you can push back that boundary, us, the more life works better for you and for others.
Well, that seems to be a thread that runs throughout the entire Us album. It's right from the opening notes. There's a tribal, a clan evocation of us. The idea of us as almost as if in those opening notes, it's like a musical title page, and then you get the lyrics of "Come Talk to Me," plowing right into the idea of the obstacles, the barriers that hinder or prevent us from growing together.
The "Come Talk to Me" song, though, originated after my marriage breakup. It was with my two daughters. The eldest one Anna was much better at sort of expressing her emotion and getting angry, and Melanie, the younger one, tended to withdraw and block off, and that was incredibly painful for me because I couldn't communicate to her, and so the "Come Talk to Me" sort of originated from that, and then I think had later echoes in the relationships.
You have Sinead O'Connor on that song, as well as another song, "Blood of Eden," which again goes back to very basic roots. And there's the element there of the original unity, the original separation, the mythical original unity and separation, and the imagery of Eden. But why blood? What's the blood imagery there for you?
Well, I think it was the process of the separation. And it's also, I think, a liquid. I mean, it wasn't a conscious, thought-out thing. It just felt right. But I think it's probably as a byproduct of the separation birth process and sort of a salty liquid in which we find ourselves.
Primal fluid,
Yeah.
the basic fluid, the sea. Is there a particular moment when you just said that there was a look that crossed your face? Does there tend to be a kind of time when those ideas, when the words, when the genesis of a song, no pun intended, comes to you? Do you find yourself walking in a country lane, sitting in a studio, sitting in a chair, talking with your daughter?
Yeah, I'm never quite sure, when it arrives, and but sometimes, a thought will come in. Quite often when I'm singing, because I think sometimes you can get into this semi-trance-like state. Particularly if you've got a great rhythm there, that just gets you sort of flowing with it. So you relax and you stop using your analytical mind in quite the same way. Maybe you shift from one hemisphere to the other, and you allow thoughts to come in from a place you don't really know where it's seated or where it's coming from. And one of the ways to deal with that, which I know a lot of singers use, is just improvising. So you just busk along and you sing anything, and then you listen back and try and understand what it is you might be saying, and that will sometimes lead you, into new pathways.
Peter Gabriel, From Us to You, will return in just a moment.
talked a lot about rhythm being the backbone of your songs, starting out with that. How do you take that then, once you've got that rhythm, that groove? What's the process for you of fleshing it out, of building it up?
Well, I'll sometimes adapt the rhythm a little bit. First of all, manipulate a bit, add some things. And on this record, there's excellent percussionist Carol Steele that did some playing for me, most of which didn't end up on the final things, but in terms of giving a sort of human, live percussion quality to the music, she would overdub to some of these original grooves. And then I'd have all these on cassette. So I have a box of rhythm cassettes, and it's almost like a menu. You look at the rhythms and you think, well, what do I feel like today? Well, I'll start out, with a little soup from this country and, a main dish from here, and we'll finish up with this rhythm from here. And you put it in the cassette machine, pretty low tech in that department, and start playing along. And sometimes it'll be chords and melodies that come out first. Perhaps the rhythm will have already suggested one or two words or a title, or at least a mood and an atmosphere. So, in a sense, it sort of helps to have it write itself in a way that the rhythm then leads you.
You must have an amazing library of these source tapes, because you've been collecting them, well, for at least a dozen years that I know of. You're one of the first people who really brought into Western culture, who sort of went out and scouted and brought back a lot of the sounds from around the world with the world of music, art, and dance. What was it that first impelled you to go exploring? What intrigued you that you wanted to go out and find these things when it was really quite rare?
I think it was because it was quite rare, and we were discovering miraculous things that were really exciting. That I thought it would be great to try and get this stuff a little more available, accessible, and popular. And maybe the way to do that is to bring a rock audience to this music, which in a way was a sort of more radical rock audience rather than mainstream. But we were quite convinced that there would be enough interest from this type of audience that we could sort of introduce a few more people to some of these artists. So that was the initial purpose for founding WOMAD, which was now 12 years ago. And the festival was full of idealism, and it was a wonderful event, and a lot of interesting groups, and some interesting collaborations took place. And I think we thought the thing would catch on like wildfire, and the shops would be full of these interesting records the following week. And of course, it was a few more years before there started to be racks marked world music. And in some ways, there's still a lot of problems with that label, because a lot of the artists think that it's a slightly more comfortable ghetto, but it's still a ghetto. And what was it that got me interested, I think, was two things primarily: the rhythms. As a frustrated, failed drummer, I was getting bored of writing with some of the rhythms that I was hearing all the time on the radio, and very much wanted some more interesting grooves. So that was combined with the mention of a programmable drum machine, and suddenly, we had the chance to put in whatever rhythms we wanted. So I really wanted to follow a little bit of research on that. And also, I think the voices and some of the passion and the performances from other countries attracted me in.
Tell me about Steam. It's just a great, fun song on this new Us album.
Yeah. Well, someone described it as hot, wet, and wobbly, and that sounded all right to me. It's playful, and I guess sort of as a sort of love sex analogy for steam, but it's also like a cloud of transformation, so that in a sense the the characters in the song, she is someone who knows everything about everything, but maybe not a whole lot about herself. And she's stuck there, and he is someone who knows nothing about nothing, and is obsessed with her. So he knows a lot about her. And the theory being that this theme is something maybe that'll move them on a bit.
What's those dichotomies again about the instinctive versus the rational, or the emotional versus the logical? I'll tell you what it reminded me when I heard it. It made me think of D.H. Lawrence. Sort of a Lady Chatterley's Lover sort of.
That sounds good, actually.
Effect there.
And in fact, this was a lyric that I'd started on the third album, the I Know You stuff. And this lyric began as a sort of urban nightmare lyric. It was a very different thing. And then that didn't seem to be going in the right place. So it shifted back into this other avenue.
That almost leads directly into another song on the album, Love to Be Loved.
Yeah.
Very open.
And in fact, those lines too were probably 15 years old. Those key lines, the like to be liked, want to be wanted, need to be needed, love to be loved, which I think I've got in the wrong order there. But it seemed appropriate at this time to do something with it. And it's also one of the journey songs, as I call it, in that it's a sort of A, B, C structure, so that I'm trying to take people from one place and go into another.
So you're consciously aware of that when you're composing the music, that you want to lead, that you want to create an adventure.
Definitely. I mean, and it doesn't happen with all songs. You know, some are more conventional structure, but I enjoy that very much in other people's music when it happens. So I think it's good to try and aim at that.
Kiss That Frog.
Right.
There's such a great life in this song, Kiss That Frog. A childish glee in a very basic part of human nature.
A 3-letter part.
The sex part?
That's exactly
That's
right.
the basic part, isn't it?
Yeah.
You can't get much more basic than that, I don't think.
And it was from this Bruno Bettelheim book, The Uses of Enchantment, that I got the idea. He was just putting out the idea, which I found intriguing, that it may have been a more useful way through storytelling of introducing Victorian kids to sex. And then there's the idea that something which might be horrific, repellent, make people a bit afraid, might, if embraced, become something wonderful and capable of giving long-term satisfaction. And perhaps the negative context which some people have for their first sexual experiences. And I think color, a lot of people, in terms of the fear department, might be a better environment for introducing it. But, I mean, really, at the end of the day, this song is playful.
Anything autobiographical in that? It is a very playful song.
Not so. I think I was certainly afraid, but I don't think I was so much repelled.
Well, there's the exhortation in the song, just jump, just go ahead and
jump
do
in
it.
the water, yeah.
Just
That
dive
sounds
right
like fun.
in.
Yeah.
And see what happens. Who knows if it's going to be a prince. The idea of diving right in, and when you talk about leading people through things, you've come up with some of your cohorts of long-standing with the idea of a theme park of the mind.
Yeah, in a sense, it's, I hope, an alternative theme park in a way. Smaller, independent, and more able to absorb new ideas is the intention. I'd originally sort of foreseen someplace was a beautiful garden. I mean, the original design was a sort of bowl of sorts with a lake at the center of it, but with a lot of falling water. And behind the waterfalls, of which we imagine there would be 12, would be hidden doors which would take you into an underground world in which you could choose a variety of experiences which would have been designed using a lot of new technology as well as sort of older handmade approaches, and really allow the participator to get involved, and that the experience itself would be interactive, and in a sense that they would shape some of the experiences that they were having.
How much of it is play and how much of it is cerebral? And I ask that because I wonder about things like interactive videos and CDs and virtual reality, and wonder about the degree to which the technology either takes us in to or separates us from the real world.
Well, part of the reason that it was called the Real World Experience Park, I mean, that was originally where the name Real World came, was for this project. The distinctions between fantasy and reality are blurring fast. And I think it's quite interesting. I mean, in terms of the visual image too, we know that text can lie, but we haven't really yet learned that the visual image, photographs, film, we know perhaps that film can be fictional, but we still tend to believe stuff when we see it.
Do you think people are not a lot more savvy, though, now? I think especially in the last few years about the manipulative aspects of media, especially of advertising.
I think very savvy, but still tend to be taken by seeing is believing. I mean, sight is a dominant sense. There's a very interesting sort of side project to the virtual reality development, which is called telepresence. And there they have, in its essence, very simple process whereby a robot head with two cameras for eyes mirrors the movement of your head. And you have the two screens in front of your eyes. And I did the demo, and my brain was telling me beyond any shadow of a doubt that I was physically where the robot head was, and looking back at myself in a strange helmet. Now, that's because sort of sight is very dominant, and the potential is to do that with hearing as well. So once you can shift the center of your senses outside of your body, then you can take it any place you like, really, whether it's inside the body, in a totally fictionalized world, under the sea, or up on a spaceship, which is where it was originally designed, so that people could be on Earth, but wearing the helmet and feeling the bits of the spaceship that needed repairing, as if they were, and looking at them as if they were actually perched outside the rocket ship, where the robot was in reality.
So if I were going into this park, imagine that it's completed. I'll do some imagining here.
Yeah.
It's happened. I've gone to Barcelona. Well, imagine it's ended up there. I've gone in and I've come out at the end of the day. What's it done to me? What would you like it ideally to have accomplished in me?
I think I would like for you to have challenged yourself in ways that you wanted to be challenged, to entertain yourself in ways you wanted to be entertained, and to go out full of sort of ideas and feelings. I mean, I love it when I've seen a great film or a great concert that my mind is buzzing and my sort of emotions are sort of charged up. And I mean, I'm working on this thing with, Brian Eno and Laurie Anderson, both of whom are extremely good in terms of working with both sound and image. And in some ways, I think what we're trying to do as artists is only a logical extension of work we do anyway. But the aim is to put the audience, instead of the outside, occupying the outside position as observer, right inside the work in a place where they can change it and interact with it and feel that they're experiencing it firsthand.
More insights and ideas from Peter Gabriel when we return in a moment.
Jump in the water.
To me, the Passion album is not just one of your most brilliant works, but one of the most brilliant works of quite a period of time.
For me, it's an extremely important record, and I think I learned an enormous amount from it. And it was a great help to get the brief from Scorsese in the first place, which was to try and get a music that had references from the Middle East, but really a much wider sort of net for the sources of influence that was both ancient and modern, that felt sort of familiar and yet fresh.
Did working on that film with Scorsese, with this out of an astonishing book of an incredible tale and its possible permutation, did that affect the spirituality in your own life at all? Because there's a great deal of spirituality, I think, in this new album, Us.
Well, I appreciate that. I think, in a way, it had some follow-through. But I think more of that sort of space for some sort of spiritual content just came from being straight with my emotional life, in a way. Facing it more directly, I think. But certainly working on the film made me think a lot of things through. And although it didn't get much support from religious groups, particularly in this country, there was no doubt that Marty was making it for spiritual reasons. And I think a lot of people who actually bothered to see the film would have found that it was different from the way that the controversy.
Well, a lot of the people who objected to it hadn't even seen it.
That's true.
They just understood that it was something that deviated from the legend, the myth, the religion as they knew it, and certainly never took into account that Kazantzakis was exploring a possibility.
Yeah.
He wasn't saying this is gospel, he was saying what if?
Yeah.
Which is a lot of what you do. You say, what if? What if I put a duduk in here? What if I use bagpipes and call up, genetic memories of Celtic tribes? What if? Always pushing those boundaries, always being out in the front of things.
Well, in truth, there are no rules, And I remember when we first started making records, and used to have engineers and producers who would tell you, this is the way you have to do things, because that's the way you do it, and that's the way people like it, and that's the way they sound best. And you knew it was bullshit, but there's a lot of pressure to go along with that, and it's only really when we had a little more confidence and a little more success that you can afford to try whatever you like. And I think it's really sad now the way in this, with the pressure of the business, that bands have to get successful on their first record, or maybe within 2 records, because there's not so much room for experimentation or encouragement in that department. But I think it's from that you learn, and you learn what it is you do.
Taking chances, kissing that frog.
Exactly. You have to make a few wrong turns before you can find out the right ones.
You got to skin your knees every once in a while.
Yeah. Which I used to do a lot when I was a kid, and riding a bicycle around the house with gravel paths.
You don't sound like you were very coordinated as a child. You were talking about not being able to drum, getting all your limbs together.
Right. Well, no, they would all function together. It was separating them that was the problem.
One of the senses I had in the album Us, and especially the closing song, Secret World, has a very wistful feeling to me. But it ends up feeling very hopeful.
Well, I'm glad you noticed, too, that it does go out on a hopeful note, because not everyone does, in a sense, because it isn't stated in the lyrics, but the musical reprise, which I know Daniel wasn't keen on at all, I thought was really important. And with that in place, I wanted it in the tail position in the record. So I think sequencing is really important. And this record has been designed to be played from start to finish.
What are your dreams like?
Well, they vary quite a lot. I mean, I think there have been a few times when I've been consciously trying to reach them and read them, which hasn't been recently. And many years back when I bought an isolation tank, it was partly for that reason. But I don't often remember my dreams at the moment.
What many people might work out in dreams, does a lot of that work out for you in your creative process?
Yeah, I think so. The only difference, though, is that in a song, you're pretty much in control. You can steer it. You can edit. You can play God.
Do you like that?
I do, in a way, yes. And probably someone else is doing it better than I am. But it's still something that is safe in a way because of that, because of the amount of control you have. And one of the reasons I liked, say, the singles group stuff that I did was because, I still had to confront the same situations, but I couldn't steer them and package them in quite the same way.
What do you feel has been the lasting or continuing effect of the work you did with the Amnesty and the Human Rights tours in the 80s?
It's hard to say what lasts, but I think we certainly made quite a few people around the world aware that there was a Declaration of Human Rights, that quite a few governments had signed on to this document, which very few of the governments actually managed to enact in the legislation in terms of applying some of those principles. And I also think it made a big impact on the membership of Amnesty. And although there's been a fair amount of drop-off, there's, I think, a much higher percentage has sort of stayed with Amnesty and some of the other human rights organizations than was anticipated.
Do you have an ultimate goal? You've dealt on this album, on Us, with so many questions of resolving issues of identity and primal parts of oneself, core parts, and moving into different veins. Is there, not that it's set in cement and this will be forever, but at this moment in time, as you finished this project and set off into the future, what do you most want to achieve? What effect do you most want to have?
In personal terms, in musical terms, or what do we...
I wondered about qualifying that. I guess I wanted to see which one you would come up with.
Right.
Either or both. We can make a multiple choice.
Okay. In musical terms, I think there's still a great deal that I have to learn, and that I'd like to get, I think, more comfortable with in some ways, and whether it's in writing, singing, working with other musicians. I mean, these parts of these processes, work really well for me, but it still feels like the tip of the iceberg. So I think really to try and push myself in some of those areas and do something that continues to try and push things a little bit. And personally, I think I want to try and get balance in my life. I want to try and get a situation where if a relationship comes along that I really want to go for, that I can do that properly. In other areas, this park project has long been a dream, so I really want to see that materialize.
Are you hopeful for the world your daughters are growing up in?
I feel there are a mixture of good signs and bad signs. I mean, it is quite disturbing the way in which we are destroying the place in which we live. But I think there are quite a lot of positive signs in the way people are able to, I think, communicate better with each other. I do believe that if on the one hand you have a sort of technological fix as a means of going into the future, and on the other you have a more sort of ecological conservation-based solution to solving the world's problems, which is to sort of remove yourself from technology and industrial society in many ways. I think the middle road, which incorporates what I would call sort of humanized technology and appropriate technology, is the line that I see producing the best possibilities for the future. And I'm told that optimists are able to do more with their lives, but they run the risk of not being, of it being dangerous because they're less in touch with reality. So I would like to be a realistic optimist. This also brings to mind an interesting thing Brian Eno told me about, which I think was a questionnaire that Stern magazine conducted, where they asked two simple questions. One, are you happy? Two, are you optimistic about the future? And of all the countries they surveyed, and I think this is about 3-5 years ago, the people apparently that were happiest and most optimistic about the future were in Northern Ireland and South Africa, which are probably the two countries you'd expect to be the least in both categories in many ways. And a lot of discussion took place about why this might be. And one idea that seemed quite credible was that if you have a defined struggle, a defined enemy, that in some ways life becomes simpler.
Us and them.
Right. And you're more likely to be happy and optimistic. Now that's a very depressing conclusion if you take it that way. But I think in many ways part of the challenge that we now have to face up to is whether we can find an enemy that doesn't have a human face, that is, say, destruction, lack of rights, these type of issues. If they can become a common enemy, instead of having to put someone else's foreign-looking face on it that you can then project all your bad stuff onto, then I think we will have successfully evolved to the next step.
It's a large task, it's a large order, but I'm awfully glad that we've got someone like you helping us along to do it. Peter Gabriel, thank you so much for spending this time.
Thanks.
The Album Network has presented Peter Gabriel, From Us to You, engineered by Steve Nelson and Charlie Picari. Special thanks to Stephen Hedges of Pro Bono Management and Bruce Kirkland of Second Vision. Thanks also to Al Curry, Alan Orman, and Warren Christensen of Geffen Records. Presentation of this non-commercial Peter Gabriel radio special is made possible by a grant from AT&T. Peter Gabriel's From Us to You was produced by Brian Boyd, Michelle Shore, and Mark Felsat. Executive producer Steve Smith for the Album Network. I'm Dierdre O'Donoghue, thanking you for joining us and thanking Peter Gabriel for all of his music and inspiration.
I stood in this unsheltered place till I could see the face behind the face. All that had gone before left no trace. Down by the ruined side, in a secret world we were colliding. All the places we were hiding, love. What was it we making it up in our secret world, seeing things that were not there. On a wing, on a prayer, in this state of disrepair, down by the railway siding, in our secret world we were colliding, in all the places we were hiding.